welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike and Navina, and thank you for hanging out with me today. In this episode, I have a great chat with Sean Johnson. And if you're not familiar with Sean, Sean is a musician turned vocal coach who runs a website called Vocal Academy 3. And he is a vocal coach who has helped out over 4,000 people with becoming better singers. And so our focus of this episode is mainly on helping people become better singers. And whether you're a singer yourself, or you're an engineer who works with other singers, or you're just in a band or whatever with other singers, and you want to be able to coach people through the process of getting better sounding vocals, singing more in key, getting better takes. That is exactly what we cover in this episode here. So with Sean, in this episode, we get into the mechanics of singing and how to get in the right headspace for singing. Because as you'll hear, Sean talks a lot about how it's one thing to have like the physical posture and have all that kind of stuff and do vocal warm-ups, but really at the end of the day, none of that matters if you're not in the right headspace for singing properly. And that is actually one of the biggest things. And if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, you'll actually get to see Sean and his posture and how he demonstrates a lot of these things, because there's a lot of physical stuff that is worth seeing. If you can watch the video, I highly recommend it. If you're listening to this podcast on audio only, that's fine too. You're still going to get the gist of what he's saying, but definitely there's an added element if you can watch this episode on YouTube. Yeah, in this episode, we get into all of the mechanics of it. We get into a lot of the common issues that singers find themselves having, whether it's singing sharp or flat or struggling from burnout, all that kind of stuff. So this episode, I think, is an awesome episode for you to learn how to become a better singer. And like I said, whether you're a singer or not, you're definitely going to find a lot of value in this. And maybe this will even get you thinking about becoming a singer. Because let's face it, you have that instrument literally in your body right now. So why not learn to use it and become a better singer? So with that said, let's just jump right into the episode because I think you're going to find it very entertaining and very informative. Sean Johnson, thank you so much for being on the Master Your Mix podcast. What's going on, dude?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Not much. I'm just stoked to be here. Stoked to chat about whatever's going on with you and your audience. Yeah.
Looking forward to it. For people who might not be familiar with you and your background in music and what you're up to these days, can you give us that story on how you got into music and teaching vocals and everything you're up to these days?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been playing guitar since I was like 10. And, just started off with learning all the Blizzard of Oz solos and just trying to figure out how to make Pro Tools work and on the family computer, and tried to crack like every single like plugin that I couldn't afford growing up. And then over the years, went to college, like got serious, did the whole grown up thing, while I had just like touring bands, like Weekend Warrior stuff. There was a point when I just kind of said, fuck this. And I quit my like actual nice paying tech job in the Bay Area, which is where I'm from originally. And just quit with no plan. Started the band. We played Warped Tour, which is cool. Synced up with another outfit who was making music about video games, aka nerdcore. So going from like the metal world, like into like just pop in sync dance moves. It went against like every fiber of my being, but fuck it. I lived in Sweden for a while. We got to play a bunch of shows over there. Played a bunch of shows at home, and then just started doing the YouTube thing. That took off pretty quickly. And as we were making videos, we just like, you have a shitload of exposure and followers, but like, what does that get you? Like nothing. So someone recommended that we create some type of like offer or like program. And we just literally asked the audience like, hey, what do you guys want? And they're just like, oh, your fucking vocals are great. And I'm like, thanks. I almost know what I'm doing. And they said, if you tell us how to sing, we'll pay you. And I was like, hell yeah. So I started taking like just random like Zoom like lessons every like 30 minutes. And then I realized I was saying the same shit over and over and over and over again. So I decided to make like a pre-recorded program. That way I could help people like more in depth when I'm actually with them one-on-one. But for me, like in order for me to understand like how to sing, it's the same thing with the guitar. I have to see what's going on. I have to like understand like the movements and everything. This is like a mystery box. So you don't know what the hell's going on unless you get like laryngoscopies. You go to the doctor, you convince them that it's for your business that's non-existent. And then they give you footage. And from that, I figured out how to make different exercises based on the different muscle sets, and have gotten some awesome results for my students. So now this is the full-time gig, just sitting in the studio and giving vocal lessons and also coaching people how to write music.
Love it, man. So where did vocals come in for you? Like, was it only after people had suggested like you should make something on vocals, or like, because you said you were a guitar player first. So at what point did you start singing?
It's like you always like try it, and then you're just like, why can't I sing? And like you have a good day and you don't understand what the fuck happened, and then it's like karaoke and you had a couple drinks, that's the ticket, and then it's like, no, that's not it. So it's just having like on days and off days and getting crazy frustrated with it. So I bought like every single vocal program I could find. I took lessons with everyone I could find. And then just through sheer frustration of like, you have to outsource the vocals to somebody else when you're like writing like your own tracks. And it's just like, hopefully you guys are in alignment with what the vision is. But more often than not, it's just like, everyone's trying to make one cohesive thing, which doesn't always work out. But it was out of just frustration and wanting to be more self-sufficient, like just being able to sit down and say, okay, I could program the drums, I could do the guitars, I could score everything. The last thing is vocals. So I just had to figure it out of frustration.
Yeah, I love that. It's one of those things where vocals are an interesting instrument because we're all born with it, but so many people don't explore that. Or a lot of people just jump right into it and they have no sort of training whatsoever. They kind of just go into it blindly. And maybe they're good, maybe they're not, maybe they develop bad habits, maybe they don't, but it's an interesting thing. A lot of people just kind of jump into it. Whereas with like guitar or drums or whatever, like people take lessons. So vocals are a weird thing because like people just naturally feel like if they're going to sing, they're just going to do it, but I'm sure there is a lot of benefit to having proper vocal lessons. Hence why we have a vocal instructor on here.
For sure. I mean, I still think it's like weird. I've been doing this for like 10 plus years. I just still think it's weird that I'm a vocal coach because it's like, again, like I just had to figure it out for my own. And then other people were just like, oh, you're good. And I'm like, oh, really? That's weird. And it's something that we said before we started, like, a lot of like your followers that listen to you, like they have that lack of confidence to be able to perform or figure it out. And it's like the biggest thing that I learned was this is an emotional instrument. I say it in one of our videos. It's like, if you're like sad, then your larynx shoots down and you cut off your nasal resonance. If you get angry, your larynx heightens and then that tongue raises up. It's like how you feel dictates what the performance is. Whereas like you could be a little nervous and be a drummer and get away with it. You could be a little nervous and be a bass player. No one cares anyways. But as far as like vocals go, if you do have that little bit of lack of confidence, and a lot of the time that lack of confidence comes from like, I don't understand what's going on back here. Like that's going to limit the entire performance and you're just going to think you're a shitty singer. When in reality, it's just like, oh, no, it's just like there's different mechanisms that you just have to move. And then you'll be able to sing, like have good nights more often than bad nights. You know what I mean? Yeah,
of course. Yeah, it's interesting because like one of the common things that I hear people say is like they'll either say I can sing or I can't sing. They're very very decisive on whether they can or not. But like, so just to throw the maybe obvious question to you is like, is singing a skill that you think people are either born with or not, or is it something that can be strengthened? Does it rely on some sort of physical advantage?
I always think about like a Freaky Friday like situation. Like if I woke up and I was in the body of someone that could never sing or has never sung before, like I could figure it out. Like it's not that you're so far gone or that your instrument is so fucked up. Like unless you had crazy surgery or gotten like some accident, like everyone can learn how to do this because it's like the way I teach is like non-negotiable things. Like if you say gug, well, now you have control over the back of your tongue. That's weird. Like if you say then you have nasal resonance presence. There you go. It's just being able to iron out like those issues. And what happens is that a lot of people just get general shit on YouTube, and then they get general results if they practice like minimally or at the bare minimum. And then they think, why am I not getting better? And then they like throw up their hands in frustration. And if they're frustrated, again, that's going to make their like voice in a certain position. Anatomically. So it's I am a firm believer that everyone can learn how to sing. Everyone has the exact same instrument. You have the same instrument as your favorite singers. They just don't have the habits that you do. Sure, like fucking some instruments are bigger, some instruments are smaller, but there's still the same muscle coordination and muscle sets based on exercises. So yeah, anyone can figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that. I think we're all born with it, and it's just a matter of using that tool. It's like we could all play drums or we could all play guitar if we practiced it enough.
That's it right there. It's just like, do you have to be born to be a drummer? It's like, fucking what? Like, no, like you just do what they're doing. Like do what's working for other people. You'll get the same, if not similar results. So
yeah, I also think it has to do with the fact that like we all talk every day, but we don't pay attention to how we're getting those sounds out. So we just kind of do it, and people approach singing that way. They've never really focused on the mechanics of their tongue and their throat and all the parts of the body that come together. And when you actually do realize what's going on and how it impacts the sound, it can drastically change how well you can perform.
Yeah, it like I call it just character building. Like if you are the most confident person in the world, like how do you speak? Well, you're getting into a better position just like subconsciously. You don't need to drill in all these lip rolls or everything else in order to feel confident, which puts you in a better position anyways. And noticing like, oh, should my shoulders be back? Should they be forward? Like, I don't care if your shoulders are super far back. If you're having a panic attack, you're going to sound like shit. So it's not this. It's just like embodying like what a good position feels like. The other thing I talk about is like characters. A lot of people play characters, and sometimes the character is your misunderstanding of what a singer should be like. You know what I mean? Like you get a kid in 4th grade and you're like, hey, Jimmy, can you sing for me? He's like, yeah, sure, mister. And then like throws everything. He thinks that that's what singing is, like just this crazy position, which is just like, no, if you speak this note this way, you could sing better. So oftentimes it's just like, how are you mentally like cosplaying as a singer? Oftentimes that solves a lot more than just 1 or 2 issues.
It's so true, especially with like screaming vocals. I remember the first time I recorded like a real screamer, and I was like, this is actually surprisingly quiet.
For sure. Like, yeah. Yeah. It's like they call it screaming or they call it fucking shouting or yelling. It's just not. It's the same thing with like vocals too. It's like, oh, well, I speak all day. And now let me try and sing very like theater kid. But that's just like, again, in one of the videos, it's like trying to water your plants, but you keep changing the hose setting. Like you're going to be all over the place, as opposed to like taking away a lot of the pronunciation, understanding like how your voice just wants to sit there. Then it's way easier to drive. So yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So this may be a bit of a loaded question too, but like, you know, you'll often hear people, when we listen to artists, we often say like, oh, I like that person's voice, or I don't like that person's voice. And people are very, very opinionated when it comes to someone's voice. So what do you think ultimately makes one person's voice sound better than another? Is that just something that they're born with?
Yeah, no, that's a good one, because it's like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Like you could get people looking at modern art, you're just like, what the fuck are you looking at? Like this is trash. And then other people are like, this is beautiful, and they actually mean it. The way I think about it is, you can tell when someone's really strained or stressed, and they're and you just think like it's not comfortable to listen to that, because you're almost like identifying with that feeling, like based on how someone's talking to you, you kind of like start to get into that like heightened sense of like anxiety or whatever, based on how hard they're clenching like that note. So I feel like when people are like identifying like this is a good singer or this is a bad singer, like are they, placing that performance like so you could just tell they're having a hard time that makes everyone else kind of cringe a little bit. Or if they're just completely just out of their body, like say fuck it and going for it, then people latch on to that emotion as well, even if they're not hitting all the fucking notes. Like one of my favorite singers growing up was Cedric Bixler from the Mars Volta. But like watching him live, he's not hitting all of his notes, but he's having a damn good time. Like I loved that, even though he's not technically hitting the notes. So it's a tough question to answer. It's like, what's the best ice cream flavor, right? It's like chocolate. Well, you're wrong. It's just like fucking okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because it's like, I think a lot of people, and again, this probably just comes down to like what you've been talking about, how singing is such an emotional thing. It's like people have an emotional feeling towards the tone of their voice. And when they hear their voice, some people cringe. Some people are like, yeah, I'm pretty good. So,
yeah, that's a big thing. So what happens when, like going back to my analogy of like little Jimmy, the 3rd grader that we're using here, it's like, yeah, he's talking like this all the time, and he's like very nasal resonant and present. And hi, I'm happy to be here. And it's like, oh, it's time to sing, and then they throw that pitch back and they go for that operatic like sound because they think that's what they're supposed to do. But what happens when people sing is they like tend to pad their instrument, so they hold things back, like and I, and they're like really holding it back as opposed to and I, like holding it forward. And what happens when you're pulling that resonance back, you're not fully like using that top end that we all have. in our singing system, you tend to get flat because you get these overtones that are simulating like the inside of your instrument. So therefore you're hearing one thing in your head. And then when you hear yourself on recording, you're like, I sound like that. It's like, yeah, all your friends and family know you sound like that because that's how you sound. But that's such a disconnect from like what you hear in your head because of those overtones. The analogy I give is like if someone broke into your house and rearranged all your furniture, like they didn't steal anything, you'd be like, what like this sucks. You'd hate it. Like it's so not cool, but it's just different. It's not bad. It's just in a different light, if that makes sense.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, I like that. And I think that, to that point, like it really just comes down to like learning the mechanics at the end of the day to be able to turn your voice into a pleasing voice. Like your voice is still going to be your voice. You're not going to be able to like take whoever's voice and put it in your throat or whatever, but like you're gonna have your own unique thing, but you're gonna be able to at least have more control over it to make it pleasing. And then once you have control over it, you're hitting the right notes and you got the energy and all that stuff. That's what's gonna make it believable. That's what's gonna make it pleasing for other people as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the other thing about like a lot of people try and sound like other singers. Like I wanted to be fucking Claudio Sanchez from Coheed and Cambria. Like talk about a dude who I fucking love or hate his voice. There's no like in between. But I just kept trying to go for those notes. And it was always this strain because I kept trying to sound like somebody else. It's like, I want you to try and have a meaningful conversation with somebody in a New York accent that you're not good at. Like, it's just like, there's that bit of emotional anxiety. You're like tight. You're like kinking the hose. You're not getting the performance out. And that's what people go for though. They have this idea of what they should sound like as opposed to building a relationship with like, oh, if I do this, my nose opens up. If I do this, like my tongue relaxes. If I do this, like my vowels are a little bit darker as I ascend, like whatever it is. Getting more curious about like how your instrument wants to operate or unlock your voice as opposed to somebody else's, like that really helps out too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. It's like, we all admire other musicians and we like, like you said, like with the Coheed and Cambria thing, like you want to sound like that person because you admire what they do. And if you study someone, you're like, okay, well, with voices, it's like they have an accent. Maybe I got to throw that accent on it or like roll my R's a certain word or a certain way or whatever, right? So like people kind of emulate what they're familiar with, but their body may not react the same way. So it's like, it's really just like getting those, understanding your own way of singing, I guess. And I know you talked about like, your own unique voice and that's really what people have to explore.
Right. And there's no like way in saying like you wouldn't be able to get to sound like that later on once you're more comfortable with your instrument. Like another example I give is like Bert Kreischer, the comedian, like he hits whistle voice all the fucking time when he's laughing. He's not trying to, but he's able to have that range. So when some people say like, oh, well, I got a deeper baritone voice, I can't sing that high. It's just like, well, yeah, you can't sing that high when you try and drag this position up there. It's like trying to get on the freeway in first gear. Like it's going to be fucking tough, but you have all the gears in order to get wherever you want. So yeah, just a quick note on that.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So as far as like managing the mental side of singing, because that is kind of what we're talking about here. Like, what are some of your recommendations as far as helping a singer get into like a good mental place where they can perform properly? Like, are there any tips that you can share there?
Yeah, I would say don't run before you walk. A lot of people, they're just like drunk singing, for example, is what I talk about. It's not actually getting hammered, even though a lot of people like don't seem to get that when I say it. It's drunk singing, but don't drink in order to do this. It's the over articulation of your lyrics. If I'm singing like this all the time, then that's like going from first gear to third gear to second gear, like at the same speed limit. And what happens is when people like start to say, oh, okay, so don't jump into a hard E vowel or like jump from one vowel to another, like mid phrase. I get that. Now let me go sing like a 30-minute set. And it's like, no, like you have to embody what that is and just slowly be able to take like your song or your performance or your cover like one section at a time. Something that I always say is the lyrics are the words, they're not the notes. So don't treat them like they're more important than the notes. Because a lot of people say, oh, but he says I here, and be like, yeah, so say ah. They're like, no, that's not how it works. I'm just like, I'm telling you, like the placement, the way you use your, I call them vowel gears. Like just like gears in a car, the way you use those gears will determine whether or not your machine will be able to sit at that speed or that pitch. So something that I would say is take all of the lyrics away, just start with one phrase in the song, and then understand like, oh, that's how I want to do that performance. Great. Now let me sprinkle the lyrics on top, because something else, as musicians might already know, it's that just enough is all you need. Like if I'm trying to do a solo, it's not grip harder on the neck or get a bigger pick or something like that. It's like, let's relax, understand like how it could be more fluid and more even. That's what we can do with our singing voice. Just take the lyrics out, do the phrase over and over, try and fix and iron out any of those issues first, then slowly sprinkle in the lyrics. And you'll be surprised at how minimal, like it's such a low amount of effort to add the lyrics back in than you think. Like, hey, what's going on? 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 My lips aren't even touching when I do that, right? So, hey, what's going on? Hey, what's going on? It's almost like ventriloquism. But then when you realize like you'll never muscle your way into correct performance, it's always like, what is the path of least resistance? What is the easiest way that I could do this? That's really going to help you out, because that's going to relax everything in your head. You're just like, okay, let's chill. Let's just let this out. Oh shit, I hit that note without even trying. Oh shit, I sung that phrase without losing my breath. So that's one of the first things that I'd say. Take the lyrics out, focus on one phrase, take the music away, because the music typically amps us up too. Like, oh, let's fucking go. It's like, no, if I'm just going to sing these notes, then maybe if I just get a piano and just pick out those notes right there. That's crucial, I would say, if you're starting from zero. Now, if you're like been singing for a while and you're just like, I want to just fix like these issues. Well, first off, like your ability to fix your issues comes down to how well you can articulate your problem. So I get a lot of students that come on these like calls that are just like, you know, I just want to like be able to like sing higher. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like if you can't articulate like, oh, I run out of breath at this area. Oh, well, it's a breath exercise that we have to do. Or, hey, I can never connect like when I'm going from like a head voice down into my chest voice, like it always cracks going down. What can I do? Oh, well, let's do like some of these articulations like voice plosives and unvoiced plosives. Like you have to think about, again, this like the rest of your body. If I want bigger arms, like why am I doing leg presses? And a lot of people do that like when they go on YouTube, because when they find like a YouTube video that's just like general information for 15 minutes, well, you're going to get general results, as opposed to, oh, I just need to focus on this thing. Oh, these 5 exercises are for that thing. So a big thing that I do is I like a lot of my students, they turn into vocal coaches like at some point in their life, either with friends, family, or actually like paying some of them to do some of the lessons now. Once you understand like just the different like sections of your voice and how each exercise correlates to it, just like, oh, these are all arm exercises, these are leg exercises, you experience crazy growth like crazy fast doing it that way.
It's interesting. So going back to what you said about like the lyrics being the words, not the notes, like I 100% agree with that. And it's interesting because I think a lot of singers actually write songs that way. You know, like they don't have the words don't just naturally like come flowing out of their mouth in the right notes. It's like a lot of them hum a melody or like some sort of gibberish or whatever. And they're already kind of doing that exercise. But it's almost like once they start finalizing what those words are, they start changing the way their performance is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So it is kind of interesting to think about it from that perspective and, you know, realize, wait a minute, I can actually hit these notes if I'm not focused on like enunciating things properly. Right.
Yeah. So there's something else, which is it's like a running joke with people that I've worked with. It's like, don't meet your heroes. And the reason that I say that is because like once you get into the resonance and you hit the note, it's a bit of a letdown because you thought it was supposed to be this crazy, powerful, like clouds part choir opens up kind of feeling, but then it's just like, oh, that's my scream. Oh, well, fuck, it sounds good, but I wanted to like feel explosive. And it's just like, well, yeah, that's not, you can be explosive, but that's how you just get shot and you get gassed like from one chorus to another. So it's very much just like, oh, I have to relax into my performances, even for the more aggressive ones, and especially for the more aggressive ones, actually.
I love that. Yeah. It's like a lot of times we look at singers and we think that they're like amazing singers or super talented because they can hit these super high notes or whatever. And like, you know, you watch someone like I don't know, like an Ariana Grande or Christina Aguilera, and they hit these like super high notes, and you're like, oh my God, they must be amazing. And to them, it's probably like just breathing, It's like, like they don't feel like any different.
Yeah, especially with like the whistle note stuff. It's like, it feels like you're holding your breath, like for a lot of the time. You're not like fully like gassing yourself. But yeah, it is like, it's not that she has like the way better cardio than you. Like I've met dudes that have insane cardios, like swimmers or runners, and they still can't hold a note. It's not cardio. It's not like you don't have to get shredded in order to be a good singer, right? Which is why it's fun to see people hit the notes that they want to hit on their first couple sessions, because it is that easy. It's not, you don't have to tear any muscle fibers. You don't have to do anything outside of understand how to articulate muscle sets. That's it. It's like dancing, basically.
It's interesting. Like, yeah, the mental thing is obvious. It's like, it's becoming clearer and clearer how important that is going into all of this. And it kind of makes me think of another thing that, like, I find this in the studio all the time, that like I find a lot of singers really struggle in the studio because they're trying to juggle way too many things at once. They're trying to focus on singing in key, remembering the words, timing, giving the right amount of energy, and all that kind of stuff. So their focus is so far removed from just like the mechanics of things. And so I was wondering if you have any suggestions for like how to better manage those thoughts and keep more of a focus while still having to multitask a little bit.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, well, I'll give the drunk singing analogy again, with vowel gears. Like if I sing, I don't know, like aw, like it's the law. I don't sing law if I go from like my bottom of the range to the top. So it's like the wrong way, la, like it gets really strained if I keep that performance. But if I change the pronunciation, la, like now I have like so much easier of a glide throughout all of that. But it's because I said law, loft, hook, food, law again at the top. So I'm changing the gear, much like in a car, going from 0 to 100. Now, there's two ways to think about that. One, I need to translate all my fucking lyrics in order to fit that gear setting. Or two, I can relax into a confident state and almost like not give a fuck, like almost drunk singing, and you get into that state automatically. You see what I mean? Yeah. So now it doesn't become like I have to translate. Like I got a lot of singers that are just like, oh, well, it's this thing, and I'm not pronouncing it like perfectly this way. And it's just like, if you just like fall back into that drunk singing placement, holding your breath back with the stoner technique that I talk about too, just understanding different vowel gears and not overpronouncing things, like, okay, great. Now I don't have to think about any of that. And now it's just timing. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's being able to just break things down, like into like, sure, we could get really deep in the weeds on everything, but ultimately it's going to come down to just relaxing into the performance, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does. Like there's it's all in how you're approaching it, and just like thinking about it and feeling those like you said, the glide made a big difference in terms of how you said that word, and like feeling like it feels smoother as opposed to being concentrated on like I gotta jump up these notes and that kind of thing. Yeah. So
and the thing about it is like even with that law example, like the first couple times you have to think about it, you have to understand, and it's the same thing like a car. It's like, 0 first gear to second gear. It's like you'll see the RPMs like, hey, you gotta change gears. This sucks, and your car just starts shaking. And then you switch into second gear and you're good, and third gear and you're good. Your body kind of feels the same way as well. You kind of start hitting the red, and then you have to readjust and then readjust. Like pronunciations, the higher that you go. And when we're talking about like, okay, well, is this what I have to think about? It's just like, no, you only have to do that a couple times to get the feeling of that openness. And then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Think about the first time someone is trying to learn how to walk, like heel, toe, knee, forward momentum, and now it's just you do it subconsciously. Like that's how I think about it. Once you open this up and once you understand what that path of least resistance is, your body wants to subconsciously take that. They're like, oh, we can do this now? Thank fuck. We're just gonna keep doing. We're gonna default that to now. Like, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So that's how I think about like over analyzing things. We can get in the weeds, but ultimately you only need to get introduced to it, and then your body will default to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's like once you understand the mechanics of it and your body just feels that, then then it becomes second nature. And I guess it's like that with a lot of things too, but you just have to overcome that initial hurdle with it, right?
Yeah. It's also why you don't see like, I mean, there's a joke about like Vince Neil, like he's like, you want to see my vocal exercise? All right, let's go. Like he's not doing the 30-minute lip trill with the water bottle and the straw, even though those things are great and fine. But ultimately, these are just things that are introducing you to how your body wants to operate and how your voice wants to come out.
Gotcha. So then as far as the topic of exercises, like you kind of alluded to this earlier, that there are a lot of exercises out there, but they're not all the right moves, or they're not all necessary for you when it comes to learning how to sing or getting stronger with your voice. Yeah. So where do you generally recommend people start as far as vocal exercises to figure out, where they should be focusing their energy?
If I'm working with somebody, basically what I do is I have a list of exercises, and if I could share my screen for a second. So what I do is I, divide it into categories, like understanding there's fry, chest mix, 50-50 head mix, etc. The vowel gears, general notes, the darker vowels versus the brighter vowels. And then once you understand like how that layout works, then it's like, okay, like a bodybuilder, do you want bigger arms? Okay, let's do the arm exercises. Oh, you're struggling with breast support. Let's go over. This is just a snapshot. It's not everything that I have, but let's go to the breast support exercises. Oh, it really sucks in my full chest voice. Okay, well, let's go. That might be larynx control. That might be adding a little bit of more nasal resonance. I want to do better runs or improv. I run out of breath when I'm doing sustains. Like, okay, well, let's do the sustain exercises and then the breast support exercises. And then the other thing is like the way that I teach, it's like, okay, like I want to coach you to be your own coach, because that's ultimately like how you keep developing. Like you don't want to be on life support like with somebody forever. It's the same thing like with a workout coach who's just like, all right, now I'm not going to tell you what any of this equipment is, but I want you to just do this motion that I show you, and doesn't explain what's going on and doesn't explain the workout or the thought process behind it. And that's what a lot of exercises are doing if you're just kind of shooting in the dark on YouTube, right? So I break things down like voice plosives, unvoiced plosives, fricatives, larynx position, like how to get those things. And then also ultimately how to develop your own exercises, like what certain, like why things are like gug, why is it GUG, why is it nun, why is it bob, all of those other things. So when someone asks me like, hey, well, what exercises should I do? It's always like, okay, well, what's going on with your voice right now? Like, what do we fix? Because I want you to 80-20 your time. Because if if you have amazing breast support, you might not need to do lip rolls for another 15 minutes to start off. You know what I mean? Like, why are we not just doing laryngeal like height control? Like that makes more sense for the issues that you're running into. And it kind of sucks because you do have to sit down with somebody and have someone like give you an assessment. But I would just say like, don't work on the things you're already good at. Like, really just take some time and think like, okay, what is the issue that's going on? Well, I feel like I'm choking myself when I go up for these higher like notes and it sucks. And then you think, okay, is it a pronunciation thing? Well, maybe it's a darker vowel at that placement. Maybe it's a more mixed voice technique that you want to run into. Maybe it's like you want to work on blending your registers. Then you work on those exercises, not just a 20-minute regimen of good luck. Like you're going to get general results. You're generally going to get burned out. And then you're going to be like, maybe I'm not born with it. That's typically what happens in that other direction. So
totally. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Because I do think that a lot of people, when you're trying to solve a problem, you need to actually get to the root of the problem. And the way you can do that is by like actually being able to articulate what is happening, as opposed to being like, I can't sing. It's like, well, what's happening? What's happening? Like, are you like you said, like, are you running out of breath? And like, how are you feeling? Like all these little things that make a difference. It's like with mixing too, right? It's like, I get people that always say, oh, my mixes, like they just don't sound very good. And it's like, well, I can't help you with that if you just give it as like a broad explanation, like what's actually happening, Is it like, oh, your kick and your bass drum, like those are masking each other for the low end. Okay, well, then now we can focus on like EQ techniques and like, that kind of stuff, right? So it's like actually articulating the root of the problem and what really is bothering you in that moment so you can learn the right exercise for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's being able to teach someone like before it's like, oh, my mix sucks versus how do I sidechain my bass and my kick? Like that's such a, okay, now we can work on this and that's going to have like such a better result. So you have to do that detective work in order to figure out what you need, or else you're just going to be spinning your wheels.
Absolutely. So to maybe go through some like common scenarios that I at least encounter a lot in the studio, like what advice would you have to someone who is maybe singing constantly sharp? Like any tips there?
Yeah, I would say you need to look at what vowel you're using. And when we think about vowel, don't look at the lyric. Like, oi! Like, that's aw, but I said I, but I didn't say ah. Like, that's way different. So when you, like, again, take the lyrics out, like, what is the sound that you're making? Are you doing like more of a, like an like but, okay. Well, if I am in this position, maybe I should try for a little bit more of a brighter placement or a brighter pronunciation of this note in order to take out all this low end resonance that's stimulating the inside of my head. And then if I get a little bit more, and something else that I say is sing into the microphone, like get out of your head and into the mic. Like, oh, hey, I'm right here. Oh, hey. It's all very much in this forward placement, as opposed to, oh, if I'm here, I might be sharp all the time. Like that's going to suck, because you're battling what you're hearing inside of your head, and then also what you're hearing in your headphones, and then also in the song. So you're just constantly going to have that little bit of friction the entire time. So if someone's like sharp all the time, like sharp or flat, it's most likely due to just like internal placement and just understanding like you're probably not using the correct vowel gear for that part of your instrument right now. So I'd consider, hey, try and pronounce these notes differently as far as the vowel base goes, and then sprinkle the lyrics on top. Get out of your head and into the microphone. That should solve a lot of your problems right there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm asking this is because there are people listening to this who are the singers themselves, and there's also people who are recording other singers and need to be able to guide people to get there, right? So, as producers, it's like whether or not we consider ourselves vocal coaches, most of us aren't trained vocal coaches like yourself who like know all of the mechanics, but we have to at least have some sort of tools to rely on to like steer someone in the right direction, as opposed to just being like, yeah, just hit record. We'll record like 30 takes. Eventually you'll get one that nails it. It's like, give them some sort of direction with it. Right.
For sure. Yeah. It's just like the no stone unturned thing, which is just like, well, even if you do it that way, then like, cool, you got it. Fuck, how did I get that? Now it's every time you sing, it's going to be 30 takes for the same thing. The other thing that I'd say is just consider how much of a mix you're using. Because your mix voice is a lot bigger than we might think. It's not just this little bridge that connects like a head voice and a chest voice. Like you can extend that in both directions. And going back to the just enough is all you need. Like, are you singing the note too hard? But you could back way off. You could hold your breath back a little bit more so too. It really does depend, but those are like the bigger principles that I think about when I'm looking at someone with pitch issues.
So when you're talking about like the mix, do you mean like more like the volume that people are projecting with?
Yeah, well, it's like this is like a whisper head voice. This is more of a mixed voice. Like I'm pulling up a little bit of chest into this. This is a little bit more 50-50, and then this is more chest dominant, and this is full chest. You see what I mean? So it's like a great like in between. So oftentimes, like again, just enough is all you need. Like I go over it's Messa de Voce. But it's just I call it a NASCAR exercise, like a car is driving by you, like, yeah, like you can control that dynamic. Like once you realize like you do not need that much to get the proper belt based on where you're at, like, that's all I'm doing right there. I'm so close to that whisper. If I keep going, like I'll crack, I'll fuck up. Like that's typically where a lot of problems come from too.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating because like, yeah, the other thing about it is that at the end of the day, no matter what volume you're really singing, you're right. In the context of a mix, like the engineer can make it sound like anything. Whether you're screaming or whispering, they could be the exact same volume on an actual recording. So it's like focus more on getting the note as opposed to like putting on a performance in the room kind of thing, I suppose, right?
For sure. Yeah. Let the microphone do the work. Mics are built for a reason. Like you do not have to be that loud. That's the quickest way to blow your shit out. Like on tour, if you can't hear yourself, like if you can't monitor it, you're going to have a terrible performance because you're going to overdo it because you're competing with a whole band. Right. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, speaking of vocal strain, like that is definitely something that a lot of people encounter in the studio. And I find that like, one thing I see with a lot of amateur engineers is that they'll record someone and they'll just say like, sing the whole song all the way through a million times. And like that in itself can be burning people out. Or they'll be like, okay, let's start off with like the chorus. And like chorus is the loudest part of the song and people are just like belting it. And then they lose their voice for the quiet, more delicate stuff. So as far as like controlling your energy levels, I suppose, while you're singing and preventing some burnout, do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I've like sat down with my like recording setup and just like looked at my input volume and tried to just keep it like as similar as possible. Like if I'm going in for like, hey, I'm whispering and then I'm more belting right there. Like you can control that characteristic without like blowing out volume. But you'll never flex yourself into the correct position. Like sometimes you need a little bit more of a push, sure, but it's never like all right, let's hit a PR. Like on fucking bench press, a lot of people think like you have to go so above and beyond to like get that endurance and that cardio and that push and like energy, effort, emotional states and things like that. I mean, sometimes you might want that desperation that's imperfect. Like, and I no shade on that. Like again, like if you want to go for that punk like route, Godspeed. I love it. But you will never force yourself into like proper position. You'll never like push harder and then the note comes out. Maybe sometimes here's the other way I explain it. Like, if you're just pushing and hoping like by take 30, you'll get it. You're just arm wrestling yourself. Like hopefully the right muscles will win, but like maybe the other muscles get stronger and you'll have more off days than on days. So, again, just being able to break down the mechanics of like where your voice is at with the note that you want to hit. And then based on how you're feeling that day, you could get more strategic about how you're executing that note based on you being sick or, just really like ballsy. Maybe you do want a little bit more of a powerful like chest push on that night. This is often why we see all of our like favorite singers are like nailing their set. They're like, sorry guys, I'm sick tonight. And we're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? You sound great. Like, no, I sound like shit. And they're just like, all right, well, we can't tell. But he's like defaulting into a sicker performance, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Like if you're sick going to the gym, you're not going to be hitting PRs that day.
Yeah, I love it. What about another issue that I hear a lot in the studio, and I don't know if this is something that is trainable through vocal lessons. I would think it would be. Is like a lot of singers have sibilant issues. Like they, their S's come through very, very harsh and stuff like that. Is that something that can be controlled through vocal coaching? Or is that just something that's like the mechanics of their body and their teeth and whatnot?
Yeah, it's not like, oh, well, I was born with this overbite, so therefore, no, it's not that at all. Because if you really just slur your words together, talk like a ventriloquist, you really take out a lot of those voice plosives and things like that. You know what I mean? It sounds ridiculous when you're speaking, but when you're singing, like no one will be able to note that. It's really just backing off just enough is all you need. Again, like if you want to get into theater, like that's a whole other conversation that we can have. Like I know a ton of theater nerds are going to be like, no, it's fucking, you need to be articulate and enunciate every part of your song. And like, cool. Like that's if you want to do that. I've just found like for more rock style and more pop style vocals and even a lot of the metal stuff too, like the over articulation is what will bite you in the ass. So most of the time another instance of like Don't Meet Your Heroes, you will feel like it's silly, but it sounds perfect. Right. And I think that's the weird thing about being like an artist or a musician. It's just like we spend like so much of our time telling ourselves that we are not good enough or like don't sound good enough. So then when do you sound good enough? Because when you do, you've been practicing that script of like, I'm not good enough, right? So when you do try something different and it works and you have everyone else saying it sounds good, but then you get that innate feeling of just like, no, that was weird. It felt weird. So therefore it shouldn't sound good. You will convince yourself it doesn't sound good, which I think is the weirdest part of any creative like endeavor. But just having that like openness to like, okay, this does feel silly. The clouds are not going to fucking part. The majority of the time, it will not feel like the clouds have parted and like it's a message from God that you're on the right track. It's for the most part, you're just like, it's a letdown. You're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I could do that. Well, cool.
Yeah. I love this because it's, it is really bringing to attention the fact that it is so much of how you push and how much energy you're putting into it that makes these little details like the sibilance pop through. And I love that example you shared there. To throw another one at you that is maybe an oddball, what about like lip smacks? Like I hear, like I have one singer that I work with in particular who like, I have to use Isotope RX to like get rid of her lip smacks like crazy. So is that something that can also be controlled? Because that doesn't seem like it's an energy level thing to me.
Yeah, it comes back to a pronunciation thing, because if it's just the whole in between takes, like maybe I'm a little bit like, okay, we're gonna do like all of this for the recording for later. But
it's gonna be like a good ASMR kind of episode.
Exactly. ASMR podcast. When you're going through your performances, you really have to kind of just check in with yourself. And then, I mean, I'd be curious if they just have that like when they're speaking, like just throughout the day, like normally. Like, have you noticed that? Is it something that only shows up in the booth?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever really paid attention to it as much, but yeah.
Yeah, some people have little like quirks like that. I would just say like just sing everything with awe and just see what happens. And then once you slowly start doing that, you slowly start baking in like, oh, this is what correct, like easy projection feels like, and how I can actually get away with singing these lines without over articulating all of that stuff. Right. The lyrics are the words, they're not the notes. You want to sprinkle them on top, like barely. Like you want some salt with your steak. You don't want steak with your salt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Well, with all of these questions, for anyone who's listening to the podcast, they won't see this, but anyone who's watching the video will. But like, as you're going through all these different examples, one thing I can see in on the camera here is that like your body language definitely changes, and like whenever you're showing the example of how to do it wrong, your body like kind of, you get into a certain posture, right? And as opposed to like when you kind of ease into it a certain way. And so I wanted to ask about just like finding that starting posture, like if there's any advice that you have for that. Because one thing I see a lot is like singers holding up their phones to read lyrics as they're singing. And like, just because of the way they're doing that, like they're just shifting their bodies all around to like maneuver from the microphone and whatnot, or like, see things easier. And I feel like that has to affect their vocal performance as well.
But the thing is that even if you're having a panic attack and then someone just like puts you into perfect posture, you're still going to have a heightened larynx and like really, I'm still reserved and I don't really know what I'm doing here. Like the posture doesn't matter like as much as people think. It does for sure, gotcha. But it's something that just happens because you're in a relaxed and comfortable state. Obviously, you don't want to like be sitting down and like kind of just like belly out and all right, let's record vocals. Like there's a limit to what I'm talking about. But I would just say act as if you're just super confident. Not that you're trying to show off. Not that I have to get confident now or else. Like that mentality is still gonna like kind of choke you up. So I find like if I told someone to just look as confident as possible, they're going to naturally just do whatever they can in order to feel confident, which is typically raising the chest and rolling the shoulders back. But if I don't feel confident and I'm really like anxious and nervous, I don't really know what I'm doing here. Like now my voice has changed because I feel that way. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like a lot of people, well, I'm not standing up straight. I can't be sitting down to do vocal tracks. It's just like most of the people I work with, they do their vocals sitting down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it gets into the territory of like, yes, obviously, like you should be standing up. You don't have to like, if I don't stand up, I'm shit mentality. You know what I mean? It's all or nothing. That's where a lot of people say like, I need my certain tea before I sing. If I don't have my tea, I'm fucked.
I need my throat coat or whatever.
Yeah. It's just like, if I don't have, no, I can't do it. And well, now you put all of your like ability to sustaining your instrument in an external factor. Like I'd rather my singers just feel like, oh, it doesn't matter if I'm on my car or karaoke or live stage or whatever. I know like in my brain that I can hit this because I know how to reverse engineer the note based on how I'm feeling in the moment. That's the best thing to think about, as opposed to, is my shoulders too far back an inch? Because then you're still in that anxious like headspace about everything.
Yeah, it really sounds like, the theme of this is just really controlling your emotions behind it, and the emotions dictate the physical as well.
But obviously it's like there's other things. It's like, okay, let's say you're ultimately confident. Like I have no issue with confidence. Why am I singing like this all the time? Well, if I hear that, well, it's like you got to pop the back of that tongue up. So I'm just going to be giving you like mechanical things to do without like stressing yourself out, like trying to figure things out, doing 30, 40 takes and just getting burned out. Because that's like going on the freeway in first gear. Like, no, this is how we shift into this. So there are some principles to consider. But if you're like, your whole performance is not going to shit the bed if my shoulders are rolled forward. You know what I mean? I can still sing those same notes.
Fair, yeah. Yeah, it's just like getting relaxed with it is the most important thing from the sounds of it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Dude, this has been really interesting. And you know, I'm glad that we ran through some of those scenarios because they're definitely things that I know I see in the studio all the time. I know other people experience that as well. And we do tend to focus just on like sharp or flat, kind of like those kind of details. But there's really a lot more to that, obviously, as we've covered, like getting the mechanics to like glide between notes and feel comfortable and all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting. And you know, I think I've maybe told the story before on the podcast, but like as an engineer, like I had no singing background at all, but I would work with people all the time. And I remember one session in particular, it was the first time I had an artist actually hire a vocal coach to come into the studio with us. And it just blew my mind, like learning those little mechanics and how to deal with like certain issues the singer was having. It just blew my mind how freeing that could be for a singer. Like once you know like those little mechanics and you know how to solve your problems, like all of a sudden you can, it's crazy how many notes you can hit and how confident you can sound and, you know, how good of a delivery you can give. So, you know, I think anyone who's singing should be taking singing lessons. Like, why wouldn't you get better at your instrument? And I also think that for a lot of audio engineers too, it's a very helpful exercise to try to learn how to sing for yourself, because when you learn those mechanics, you can also help other people with this as well. So cool, man. So if people want to learn more about you, study with you, learn online, work with you, like what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, just go to vocalacademy3.com. I had 2 other iterations of the program, so 3 just sticks. So vocalacademy3.com. If you want to check things out, I got a free program that's in there. If you want to talk more one-on-one about like the issues that you're working on, see how I can help you out, maybe help you out being creatively constipated, I got you. That's like my specialty, just showing you how things work. So yeah, just go visit that site. I'll probably make a special link for you just in the bio. Just as like a homie discount or just hooking people up that are on your list. But yeah, just vocalacademy3.com. Be more than happy to help you guys out.
Awesome. And we'll put those in the show notes as well so people have that. Awesome, dude. Cool. Sean, this has been great. Thank you for taking the time to do it.
Yeah, right on. Have a good one.
So that was my interview with Sean Johnson, and I found that really helpful. I think that, like I said at the very beginning of this, whether you are a singer or you're just an engineer working in the studio with other singers, or if you're in a band with other people, and you find that you need to guide a singer at some point to help them get better performances, this episode was super helpful because I felt like Sean gave us lots of practical tips for how to improve your singing and how to make adjustments in your body and mentally to ultimately sing better. And that's really important. And I like that Sean did focus on the fact that, you know, vocal exercises and posture, that kind of stuff, like, sure, that can help, but it only helps if you're in the right headspace to sing. So I like that he even focused on the emotional side of it as well and how that plays such a big part in getting better performances. And I think that as audio engineers, that's really important because we need to know how to make people comfortable so that they can feel like they can hit those notes. They feel like they're getting the emotion that they need across. And they're not in their head about every little detail and, you know, getting worried and overthinking things, because that's ultimately going to lead to, you know, wrong notes, vocal burnout, all that kind of stuff. So I like that Sean talked about mixing the emotional side of it with the actual physicality of singing. So yeah, I think that that is super helpful. Now, as a special gift for Master Your Mix podcast listeners, Sean has actually offered a really cool opportunity for you. Sean is going to be offering a free vocal lesson to anyone who's listening to this podcast. So if you're looking to get better at singing, you want to learn the mechanics of it, or you want to learn how to ultimately coach people through the performance, this is a really good opportunity to learn more about how to get that control, how to sing better. And Sean is making this completely free for anyone who's interested. So if you're interested in taking him up on that, make sure to visit MasterYourMix.com/vocal lesson. And from there, you can sign up on his page to book a time to speak with him and go through his exercises and learn more about how to become a better singer. So once again, make sure to check that out, MasterYourMix.com/vocal lesson, and you can get a free lesson with Sean today. So I hope that you found that podcast helpful. And if you did, please make sure to subscribe if you're not already. That way you're notified about all new episodes as they go live each and every Wednesday morning. And if you need help with the production side of it, you're not sure what steps to be taking during the recording, editing, or mixing stages to make your track sound pro, then inside of my coaching program, Amplitude, that is exactly what I help my students with. And in that program, I work one-on-one with everyone so you can get a repeatable process to follow for every song you work on. And this is going to make the process easy, and you're not going to have to worry about second guessing yourself or feeling scattered as you work. We make it super simple for you to follow and give you a point A to Z method. Plus, as you implement everything, you're going to get one-on-one feedback on your tracks. So that way you know that you're implementing it all properly. And I'll listen to your mixes, I'll listen to your edits. And if there's any comments that I can offer to help you get your songs to that next level, make them sound the way your favorite records sound, then you're going to get that as part of this program. And we'll make you customized videos to help you learn what to do in order to get those results. So if you're interested in learning more about that, make sure to visit MasterYourMix.com/amplitude, and you can find all the details on that program there. And with that said, we've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around to the very end, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@masteryourmix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit MasterYourMix.com.